It was a bitter February afternoon in 1956 when the snow fell sideways across the New Holland auction yard in Pennsylvania, the kind of cold that gets inside your bones and stays there. The good horses had sold hours earlier. What remained were the leavings, sway-backed mares, foundered ponies, old plow horses whose useful days were long behind them. They stood in silent rows on the kill buyers' trucks, heads low, waiting for the short ride to the slaughterhouse. Harry DeLayer was late. He was always late to everything that winter. The young Dutch riding instructor had left his pregnant wife and 3 small children at home on Long Island, driven 6 hours through a blizzard because the Knox School needed safe lesson horses, and he had exactly $300 left in the world to spend. By the time he pushed through the gate, the auction itself was over. All that was left was the smell of wet manure, diesel smoke, and the low, resigned breathing of animals who already knew their fate. He walked along the line of trucks, boots crunching in the frozen slush. Most of the horses didn't even raise their heads. One did. A big gray gelding stood at the back of the last truck, half hidden behind 2 bays. He was tall, 16'3", maybe more, but so thin that every rib showed like slats in a fence. His winter coat was matted with burrs and old sweat, his knees scarred from years in harness. A jagged white blaze ran down his face, and his eyes were the color of winter sky just before dark. When Harry stopped in front of him, the horse didn't flinch or pin his ears like the others. He simply looked at Harry the way a tired man looks at another tired man, as if to say, "Well, here we are." Harry asked the driver how much. "Already sold," the man said, spitting tobacco into the snow. To the meat buyer, $80 takes him off my hands right now, or he ships out in 20 minutes. Harry counted out 4 crumpled 20s from his wallet. The driver shrugged, lowered the ramp, and the gray horse walked down as quietly as a dog coming when called. When the snow hit his back, he shivered once hard from ears to tail, then stood still while Harry looped a rope around his neck. Harry's 4-year-old daughter, Harriet, was waiting in the truck cab, bundled in blankets. When she saw the horse, her eyes went wide. "Daddy, he looks like a snowman." The name was decided before they even reached the highway.
Snowman. He was 8 years old, according to the faded tattoo inside his lip. Someone had once called him something else, but no one remembered what it was, and the paper that might have told the story had long since been lost. All Harry knew was that he had bought the ugliest, thinnest, cheapest horse in Pennsylvania, and that he had to get him home before the storm closed the roads. The drive back to Long Island took 11 hours. Snowman stood in the 2-horse trailer without once kicking or weaving, patient as stone. When they finally pulled into the barn at Hollandia Farms just after 3 in the morning, Harry led him into a box stall, gave him a flake of hay and a bucket of warm water, and left him alone. Snowman did not lie down for 3 days. He stood in the corner, head hanging, as if waiting for the blow that always came next. Harry watched him from the doorway and felt something twist in his chest. He knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror the day the Nazis took his family's horses. He had seen it in his father's eyes the night they fled occupied Holland on bicycles. Some things you never unsee. On the 4th morning, Snowman ate. On the 7th, he nickered when Harry came with the wheelbarrow. By spring, he had filled out enough that the children at the Knox School could ride him without fear. He carried beginners with the patience of a saint, never spooked at flapping jackets or umbrellas, never hurried a fence. He was the perfect school horse. That should have been the end of the story. It wasn't. In May, the Knox School closed for the summer and Harry's paycheck stopped. There were doctor bills, mortgage payments, 4 children now and another on the way. Harry sold Snowman to a doctor in Connecticut for double what he had paid, $160. It hurt, but it was necessary. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. "You better come get your damn horse. the doctor said. "He jumped out of a 5-foot paddock and walked 6 miles back to your barn. He's standing at the gate right now, dragging a tire I tied to his halter to keep him put." Harry drove to Connecticut, loaded Snowman, and brought him home. 2 weeks later, the doctor called again. "He did it again. This time he jumped the stone wall by the road. I'm done. Keep him." Harry kept him. That was when he started jumping Snowman himself. Not seriously at first, just poles on the ground, then cross rails, then little verticals in the back field. Snowman jumped them the way other horses trot, easily, happily, with feet to spare. Harry raised the fences. Snowman raised his effort exactly enough and no more. By the end of that summer, Harry had built a 5-foot oxer out of telephone poles, and Snowman sailed over it like a bird. Harry entered him in a little local show under the name Snowman, rider H. Dallaire. They won everything. The judge, an old cavalry officer, walked up afterward and looked Snowman over with something close to disbelief. "Where on earth did you find this horse?" "On a slaughter truck," Harry said. The judge laughed until he realized Harry was serious. Word began to spread in the strange, closed world of Long Island horse shows. There was a big gray gelding, a former plow horse who jumped like a Grand Prix horse and cost less than most people's saddles. In 1957, they moved up to the open jumper division, the big leagues, where the fences were 5'6" and wider than a house, where the competitors rode imported warm bloods that cost more than most people's homes. The first time Snowman walked into the ring at Piping Rock, the crowd laughed out loud. He looked like a delivery horse who had wandered into Churchill Downs. Then he jumped a clear round, and another, and another. By the end of the year, he was reserve champion of the entire East Coast Open Jumper Circuit. In 1958, Harry pointed the trailer toward Madison Square Garden and the National Horse Show, the Olympics, the World Series, and the Super Bowl of American show jumping all rolled into one. The best horses in the country would be there, the best riders, the press, the television cameras. Snowman had never been on a train before. He stepped off at Penn Station as calmly as if he rode the subway every day. When they let him into the warm-up ring, people openly stared. One woman was heard to say, "They'll let anything in here these days." The first class was the International Stake, fences up to 5'7" with spreads that looked like ravines. Horse after horse faltered, refused, fell. One warm blood flipped over backward and landed on his rider. When Snowman's turn came, the announcer's voice carried a note of amusement. "Entry number 142, Snowman, owned and ridden by Harry Dallaire." Harry shortened his reins, gathered Snowman into a slow canter, and turned toward the first fence. Snowman took off perfectly, cleared it by 2 feet, landed running, and never looked back. He jumped the entire course without touching a rail. The crowd, which had been chuckling moments earlier, fell silent. Then they began to applaud, not politely, but the way people applaud when they have just seen something impossible. They won the class. 2 nights later, they won the championship stake. The newspapers went wild. "Cinderella horse wins national title. $80 plow horse shocks blue blood jumpers. Snowman does it again." Life magazine sent a photographer. So did Sports Illustrated. Johnny Carson invited them on The Tonight Show. Children wrote letters by the thousands. One little girl from Ohio sent her entire allowance, $2.37, so Snowman could buy extra carrots. Harry turned down offers of $100,000, then $250,000, then $500,000, more money than he could have imagined in his whole life. Snowman was not for sale at any price. In 1959, they came back to Madison Square Garden and did it all again. Snowman became the first horse ever to win the Open Jumper Championship at the National 2 years in succession. He also won the Professional Horsemen's Association Award and was named Horse of the Year. He was on the cover of every horse magazine in America. He still gave lessons to 8-year-olds on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He still jumped over other horses for fun when Harry felt playful. He still came when Harriet, now 6, whistled from the backyard. He still slept in the same stall he had stood in that first night, the one with the crooked board he liked to rub his forehead against. In 1960, the fences got bigger, the courses harder, and Snowman's legs began to feel the years. Harry retired him at the top, before anyone could say he should have quit sooner. They held a retirement ceremony at Madison Square Garden. 10,000 people stood and cheered while Snowman took one last lap of honor, Harry riding bareback in a business suit, waving his hat. Snowman lived another 14 years. He taught hundreds of children to ride. He posed for countless photographs. He stood patiently while veterans who had lost limbs in Vietnam learned to balance on his broad back. He grew fat and shiny and opinionated about peppermints. In the spring of 1974, his kidneys began to fail. Harry stayed with him in the stall for 3 days and nights, sleeping on the straw, talking to him in Dutch the way he had when they were both young and the world was new. On the last morning, Snowman laid his head in Harry's lap and closed his eyes. Harry cried the way he had not cried since he was a boy in occupied Holland. Then he called the vet. They buried him under an oak tree on the hill behind the barn, the place where he used to stand looking out over the fields on summer evenings. Harry put up a simple stone that read, Snowman, 1948 to 1974. He showed the world that heart is greater than pedigree.